My name is Aaron Lopresti. I've been a comic book artist, a commercial illustrator, and a writer for over 25 years, and this is my YouTube channel. All right, I have dipped my brush. I have twirled the point as we discussed previously. And now we're going to get into inking. The first thing I'm going to do is do the outline of this character, which is a garbage man close-up. This is a little bit harder to do because I can't get the paper at the exact angle I want to because I'm trying to film this. But we'll do the best we can. And as you can see, not every line I do is just this perfect, unbroken movement. Sometimes I will draw the ink on a little bit like I would use a pencil. I don't necessarily always follow the line as it's penciled either. When you're inking somebody else, you try to do a pretty good job of going over exactly how they've drawn it because you don't want to tick them off. But when I'm inking my own stuff, I can do whatever I want. And I always encourage people that are inking me to kind of do their thing. I say, I don't care what you do or even what it looks like as long as it looks good when you're done. So I'm never exactly married to one style. I'm all about it looking good, man. Okay, so what am I doing here? I'm trying to, as we talked about in the previous segment, trying to get this a little bit, maybe, I don't want to use the term loose because I'm certainly not a loose inker, but a little randomness maybe to it so it's not super slick because I mean this is Garbage Man. So if I want to come in here, I can come in and like maybe put a little knob right there with my brush to kind of make the line a little bumpier looking. Again, a little bit more organic. That's a word I use a lot with Garbage Man because I think it's pretty fitting. And you can see how I'm controlling the width of the thickness of the line by pressure. Although this is all going to be blackened in, so you're not going to be able to appreciate the line width and variances on the finished work. But for the sake of what we're doing here, I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. And this is, you know, there's a lot of short bursts here, so it's hard to get a lot of line variance because you don't have a real long stroke to vary the line width. But I use the pen, or pardon me, I use the brush a lot like I would use a pencil. You just have to make sure that your strokes are controlled. And I'm obviously doing this slower than I would with a pencil. And I'm like, can add some extra lines here and there, whatever. You're not, if you're inking, you're not tracing. I mean, you want to make sure you maintain the integrity of the drawing that you're inking. But that doesn't mean you can't add a little bit here and there in terms of line work and effects to kind of punch it up a little bit. You can see on these veins right here on his face that those lines vary quite a bit in width. So I can do a couple of things. I can go like that and sort of do either side of it and fill it in, or I can use pressure to create a thicker area on my brush. Like I might do like that. I still have to go over twice with it. And I can leave little open areas in the line work, like you might see that in a pen drawing or a pen inking. And that kind of creates, which I talked about earlier, a sort of energy to the ink work, so it feels more like the pencil work does, where you have where everything's not exactly even and right. There's like some broken lines, and your variances of your line width and things like that help to create that energy and liveliness in the drawing. On really short feathering lines like we're going to do right here, I generally tend to ink out of the black like we showed in the previous segment. Just because the lines are so short that it's easier for me to do it that way. But again, this is all about having a really light touch. And I think that's probably the most difficult thing for people starting out inking, is having that control and how hard you're pressing. Because it's always easy to put a really light line down and build up rather than accidentally put a really heavy line down, and then you got to come in with whiteout or something else to kind of make it thinner. So I always tend to err on the side of having a light touch. All right, now this is going to get interesting here because the pressure's on. I'm going to do some feathering here on camera. Let's see if I can do it without screwing it up. Now again, these are all short lines, so I'm going to do what I described as the Wrightson method. Go from thick to thin. So I get my feathering lines. I still pretty light touch, as you can tell. Those are pretty thin lines. And I don't have as much control doing it that way because you're kind of swiping out. But I don't necessarily want a ridiculous amount of control. It's the difference between doing Wrightson or Brian Boland. Boland is just out of his mind, control-wise, and Wrightson's really loose, or can be really loose at times. And I kind of like to meet sort of a happy medium in there because I'm fans of both of their work. And I always try to when I get to the end of the feathering, I try to make the lines smaller and smaller, so it kind of feels like that feathering is sort of fading away. And again, that is something that I like the look of. It comes down to what you want your finished work to look like. That's going to determine the choices you make inking. And they may not be the same choices I would make. And I would certainly never say, there's necessarily a right way or a wrong way. This is just my way. Okay, just for the sake of argument here, I'm going to go in and feather into the black. The version we use for exercising more control. I want to make sure that I don't have a lot of ink on this brush. I already have swirled it and got the extra black off, but there we go. Not the best job I've ever done, but, the pressure of being on camera. That was better. And again, that was all very light touch and then heavy pressure at the end. I'll go one more round here. And you can see how that, it gives you a straighter, more controlled line. I'm going to go back over the top of this to create a little cross hatching. You'll notice I changed the angle of the paper, which what most inkers will do is when they're inking not on camera, they'll turn this page quite frequently to get your hand at the right angle that you want it at to create the line work that you want to create. For the sake of the camera, since I don't have anybody operating the camera for me, I have to kind of lock it down so I know I'm staying on camera. But normally I'd just be spinning this page around like crazy, doing different feathering lines at different angles so that it was comfortable for my hand, so I could get the most or I should say the best angle to create the line work that's comfortable for my hand. Again, I'm using the feathering out of the black method for these short, stubby little feathering lines. I feel it's easier but as you can see, there is some randomness involved. Sometimes a lot of it's a lot like drawing sometimes too, just like you would with a pencil or something. But again, you can't do that if you have not developed the control. Sometimes I'll go in and put in lines that I didn't when I was penciling. Because when you're inking, you can tend to get a little line happy. This all comes down to one thing: control and a light touch. And that's all developed again through practice and repetition. Gary Martin has a great book called The Art of Comic Book Inking. It's by Gary Martin. He was sort of my mentor, and we don't ink a lot alike, but I did learn a lot of techniques and stuff from him. One thing he pushes pretty hard is this concept that your line work should be heavier on the shadow side of a figure than it would be on the light side of a figure. In other words, if the light is coming this way, this line right here on this stick would be lighter, and the back side of it would be darker line. It helps to create some volume. I don't necessarily always adhere to that, because I'm a firm believer in rules were made to be broken. But it's like once you understand the logic behind that, then you can sort of manipulate it as you need to. Because again, the most important thing is not, oh, does it make sense? Is it logical that it would happen this way? Does it look cool? Does it look good when you're done? Those are the things I am judging a good inker on. Not, did he, enforce all the rules and, can explain every single reason why he did every little thing. That's great, but if it doesn't look good, then I don't care. And again, what looks good to me may not look good to you or to somebody else. So you have to know who you're working with as an inker and what they want from you, or if you're the penciler, what you want them to do as an inker. I do think there's sort of these non-negotiables that are, again, tied to aesthetics, that certain things just look good and certain things don't look good. And you sort of have to train yourself to understand that. And that goes by, you develop that by looking at a lot of different people and what they've done, what style certain people are working in, and what sort of line work will work best with the style that they're in. But never assume anything if you're inking over a penciler. Always, ask them, hey, how do you want this to look? What are you going for? That type of thing. Just filling in some blacks here. Sometimes I'll use like a worn out brush to do that rather than use my good brush. How do you know when your brush is bad? It's when the hairs on the end of it start splitting and you can't get a nice thin point and it won't hold it. But anyway, there you go. That's that face all inked with a brush. Could have done a lot of this line work with a pen. It might have been faster in some ways. Again, what tool you use is not as important as how it looks when you're done. As long as you're getting the look you want at the end of the day. So one thing I will say, remember when you're inking, there's a couple things you want to take into consideration in terms of thin or thickness of line. You want to be careful you don't go too heavy with your line work, because when you do, your stuff ends up looking like a coloring book. Or don't go too thin, because if you go too thin, when it shrinks down and prints, it'll break up. Your line work will break up. So there's sort of that happy medium you have to find. And again, it all goes back to the same thing. What do you want it to look like? And also being aware of what it's going to look like when it prints, so that you can make those adjustments while you're inking it, so that you know, okay, I'm going to do it this way, but I know when it reduces down and prints, it's going to look this way. And that again is just experience. You can also, you can scan your own work and print it out smaller to get a look, of what it might print like before you commit to one thing or the other. But the main thing with inking is very technical, but it's also an artistic skill, and it just requires a lot of practice in getting control of the instruments you're using to ink with, and then having a good, clear understanding of what looks good and what doesn't. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. You can also hit the notification button to get alerts when I post a new video. Make sure you come back by soon so you can check out my next episode.